we have an awesome guest with us, Dr. Akiva Perlman, one of the notable therapists in the Jewish community.
People don't realize that therapy is a place to tell people what you think, even your therapist. And if your therapist can't handle it, that's a problem. Is there something you're looking to achieve through this experience? Aside from your own sort of conquering yourself and evolving into a place, is there a message you're trying to share? Addiction, for example, is not the problem. The suffering is the problem, and it manifests in addiction as a solution to that particular problem. So you need empathy for the journey, but then the responsibility for the action. And without that, when it's just about the empathy, we could stay in that victimized mentality for years.
What's important to me is the challenge, because that's the journey.
It's
good to just build the muscle of not giving a flying shit what anyone thinks.
And I've struggled a great deal with the promise at times that people offer, that go on this journey and it's all gonna be good. I think that's a promise that hurts people in the long run.
What do you think has been the transformation of most of these rabbis coming around?
We tell ourselves we don't give advice, but the way you ask a question often is giving advice. The way you phrase it lets the person know how you actually think and what you believe they should do. The greatest honor you could give a person is give them the space that they could be themselves and they could figure out which next step they should take.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Mislaibeled. If you are watching this, if you could please like, subscribe, and comment, it would mean the world. Please jam the freaking like button. Please hammer the subscribe button. Thank you so much. We have an awesome guest this week. My apologies for last week. It was the inauguration. I was on vacation. I was chilling. And I just decided, with everything going on in the world, Trump, as much as Mislabeled's amazing, I just felt people weren't going to tune in that much. So I decided, something, we're going to resume this week. And we have an awesome guest with us, Dr. Akiva Perlman, one of the more notable therapists in the Jewish community right now. So
it's an honor, man.
Akiva.
It's really special to be here.
May I call you Kivi?
Please. I prefer being called Kivi. I made a mistake with the whole Akiva thing.
Really? Now why?
Yeah, it was like an insecure moment in my life. Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole journey of becoming a therapist, you kind of need to find your bearings. You need to figure out where do I belong? What am I good at? Where am I best served? And of course you go through those years of not really knowing until you figure it out. And I think in that time period, I felt like Kivi was too childish. That was my childhood name. That's the affectionate name that is my nickname. All my family, my parents, I was Kivi. And then one day I decided I need to sort of build myself up because I didn't feel big on the inside.
Yeah.
So let me do something on the outside. So I went with Akiva. And I think it's one of the unfortunate, moments where I made a mistake because I really prefer Kivi. I really do.
How long ago was this?
Maybe 15 years ago.
You can't revert, you're saying?
I could, and that's why anytime let's say I'm a professor in graduate school, and after everyone graduates, I know that when I'm teaching, I need to be the professor, because I need to give a grade, and that's the respectable role to be in. But after they graduate, or after they finish my classes, I say, from now on, please, I'm Kivi.
That's so awesome.
And I want to journey alongside you. This is not I'm not your teacher anymore. I'm just a fellow traveler.
I love that. That's really, which graduate school are you professor?
Wurzweiler with, very often I'm teaching mostly with Sarah Schneer, which is more of the religious program that has contracted with Wurzweiler. So I'm teaching a lot of that chevra, I've been doing for many, many years at this point.
Do you still run your private practice?
I have a small private practice, maybe not even 10 hours a week, and I opened up a center in Williamsburg for therapy, a Yiddish-speaking therapy center that takes insurance, psychiatry, and it's also a training center. It's an amazing place.
Wow.
So thank God we have 40 therapists there now. It's an amazing program.
That's unbelievable.
Really, really.
You started that how long ago?
The program existed before me, but it was kind of a smaller program, a part of a broader organization. And then when they brought me in with some other people, we really made a tremendous impact on the community.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, meeting with all the leaders and the activists and making therapy accessible to a community that therapy is not so available to them.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting you're saying that because, just to hop right in, it was actually a question that I had for later on, but why not? Obviously, cost of therapy is a fortune.
Yeah.
What's your feelings? I know that there's specifically one, now I just heard of another person who literally, if you call them and you ask them how much they charge for a session, it's like $500. Like that's their cost, $495 or $515, like crazy.
I like
numbers.
the $495. I don't want to get to $5 yet. I'm still in the $4s.
Yeah,
Maybe it makes them feel better.
They're going to $499.99. You know, the classic marketing move. But what's your thoughts? Obviously, on one hand, you have like, I'm all pro capitalism, just to clarify. Like I am. At the same point, this happens to be going on obviously in the Orthodox community. So from the Orthodox perspective, since you're very involved in the community, what's your standpoint on, like, does someone have an obligation to the community to not charge whatever the hell they want and quote unquote price gouge, especially because perhaps they're the person that keeps them being referred to someone for the help that this person needs? What's your position on that?
It's really complicated because, like you, I believe in capitalism, and people should make what they could make. And we work really hard, and there's a reason why certain therapists are able to charge more. They've most often just dedicated their life to that, and and they should get paid for that to some degree. I think that therapy has always been like a virtuous profession, always. And it's a very strange thing in the last 10 years or so within our community. It's just become something that is so unaffordable to the mainstream, and that's a problem. So I had teachings from the people who sort of trained me, where they said there should always be a portion of your practice that you're either seeing for significantly less than what you charge, or possibly even for free, just to allow yourself to be in a state of, I'm remembering why I'm here.
Wow.
Now, of course, you should make a living. Everyone should make a living. And the whole community, the standard is so high. And why shouldn't therapists also be able to do that? But it's really complicated. It's one of the main reasons why I sort of left that world and ventured into a space where I could provide hundreds of hours of therapy a week. That's free. It's all covered through insurance.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How do you... obviously, the issue with people who take insurance is that typically great therapists do not take insurance.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you balance we provide insurance, but therefore we're not going to get paid as much, and the therapist therefore won't get paid as much, but we're going to provide great service all at the same time. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it wasn't simple trying to come up with a model. How could we provide great therapy, often from newer therapists that can't necessarily charge a great deal of money? And what we ended up doing is we created a center that's a training environment. So all the people that are up top are people that are charging that amount of money that you're talking about. You can't get into their offices and their practices. And I brought them in as supervisors, as the people who are sort of guiding everybody else. So it's a training environment. Our therapists spend 5 hours a week involved in training, not only giving therapy, and then they're getting paid for that as well. So what I have found is that even with newer therapists, when there's someone behind them who's phenomenal, they could hold their hand through that process, it speeds everything up, and it allows us to provide that high quality of therapy. Obviously, there are certain things that we don't feel comfortable fully treating, things that need a specialty, or they need someone with 25 years of experience. But the general struggles that people are facing, we're really able to service. And I think the main difference was the degree of training that we're providing, and also the level of supervisors, that when there's someone behind you who has all that experience, it helps you elevate your game a lot quicker. And there's someone holding your hand the whole time.
It's like a doctor and a PA. It's like that idea, even though I hate PAs. It's I want to speak to the freaking doctor.
I didn't know there was a thing.
No, I don't hate PAs. I'm just the type of person in general, when I have a problem, I need the absolute best. I don't try solving things by, the second rung in the letter. So when I go to a doctor and the first meeting I get to see the doctor in this, that's after waiting 2 hours, which is a different conversation, which I have to just go off on a quick rant. I have no understanding why being a doctor in that field is the only field where it's, what time is my appointment? 3 p.m. I show up at 3 p.m. and it's like, we'll see you at 4:30 p.m. It's like, do I not have a life either? That type of idea. But
it could be a power play, at least
whatever
partially.
it is. This is why can't you just see me at the time? That's why we made the appointment. We made it for that time so you could see me at that time. Otherwise, just tell me to come at 4:30 and I'll show up at 4:30. But anyways, whenever I then go to the second appointment or whatever it is, and it's like, okay, fine, moving forward, you're going to see the PA. And I'm like, what is going on over here? So, but I'm with you. I do see how for most normal functional people who aren't as anxious as me, this could be a very, very good outcome.
And it's also in a community that therapy is fairly new. So we're also introducing therapy to the community.
In Williamsburg.
Yeah. We have articles in the newspapers all in Yiddish. There's a show, Kalma Wasser, which is where all the Hasidim get their information from, news, and we have a show on there. You know, it's an English-speaking show, but we're speaking about basic principles and introducing the community to a new way of seeing things.
How are the rabbis dealing with that?
Many of them, if not most, are very supportive of what we're doing because, again, we're doing it in conjunction or in alignment with what their values are as well. We understand that that's important.
What do you think the transformation has been over the last, let's call it 10 to 15 years, where if you tried doing this 15 years ago, I don't think it would have flown. And I think there are plenty of rabbis, there was a default position, let's call it 15 years ago, that therapy and going to therapy, especially if you became not religious, etc. It's, it's terrible, it's anti-Torah, etc. What do you think has been the transformation of most of these rabbis coming around to like, oh no, this is not anti-Torah. Like we're in fact we're supportive of this. It's like they did a full 180.
Yeah. Well, I still think we have those tensions, and I think it's reasonable that we have those tensions. And we have to understand like the values sometimes of therapy are not always aligned with the values at times with different religious groups or different values. And there is a conflict at times, meaning the religious world is primarily focusing on the soul, the spirit. That's the primary focus of humanity. Psychology, its whole history, almost always started by atheists and with like an anti-religious kind of element. Freud classically said that if you're religious, it's sort of like a protection against living with the vulnerability of the unknown. So we need to create certainty because we don't know how to live with uncertainty. And he saw it as a defense mechanism, religion. That was his take on it. And all the students and all the ideas that we've learned like really come from with some of those ideas. So I really honor that. I don't look at it as like, oh, everyone's crazy, just should get straight on board. I think there are things that we all need to learn about one another.
Do you, for lack of better terms, agree with the Freudian method that the two can't coexist simultaneously?
You're talking about religion and therapy?
Yeah, like to me, that's more of there's a piece of that jumps out at me, that they have to be, that they have to be contrary to each other, because in my mind, it's like, why do they have to be contrary? Meaning, why can't you, I get that its original origins came from a place of being anti-Torah, but why, in its form today, and why can't the same lessons be taken out and used in conjunction?
And no, I think that they can, but I think it's complicated. I think we need to find that place, and it takes like an aware and sensitive person who's like holding both of those values at the same time.
Right.
So it's a juggling act, and not everyone pulls it off well. I ran a study myself, and I met with religious therapists who I presented them with situations that were sort of anti-religious. And just to get a sense of how would you respond to this?
Could you give me an example of that?
You're working with a client and they let you know that they're gay. They're struggling with that. And what happens, what I was looking at is what happens to the therapist in the moment? What voices do they ultimately follow?
How did you measure what happens to them?
It was a qualitative study, so it was more dialogue.
Okay.
We were having conversations, and you have enough of those conversations, you put all the information together and you extract like ideas.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to see like what happened to people in that moment. And what I discovered, and these were all seasoned therapists. I didn't do this study with therapists who were 2 years in practice. I did it, I think it was 7+ years practice. And many of them like were in conflict as to what do I actually listen to? Do I listen to the religious side? Do I listen to the psychological side? And there are times that there are conflicts that emerge. And not everyone deals with it so well. And I think there needs to be for...
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What do you think the response in that situation should be?
Listen, I think that when you're...
I didn't bring you in here for easy questions.
I appreciate
Just
that.
letting you know that right now.
Our job is to always focus on the individual who's in front of us.
Yeah.
And do the best we possibly can to help them arrive at a place of selfhood, self-respect, dignity, comfort in their own experience. And that happens to be the example I gave, which is not a radical example, it's a common enough example, but it's one of those things that we haven't quite figured out what exactly is the role. It's one of those challenges that we face. It's a part of the human struggle.
When you say we haven't figured out, you mean...
I'm saying that from a religious perspective, it elicits a lot of conflict.
Is the we the therapist, or is it the community, or both, do you?
When I'm referring to the conflict of the therapist, the community, how do we resolve some of these things? Obviously, the mandate is, here's a person who's struggling and suffering with whatever that is. Let me be there with that person. Join him on his journey.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, I mean, who am I? But to me, that's not even a question. Meaning the gay question to me is not a question, because the idea of a real, call it for lack of better terms, Baal Bitachon, Baal Emunah understands that Hashem created the world and he created it and he's running the world and he created it as is. And people need to journey through their experience. It's not, obviously when we can help, we help.
Yeah.
But when someone comes to you and this is their reality,
Yeah.
like our job is, I don't believe, to go and change something that's not per se meant to be changed. Meaning like this, unless, if the person's coming to you asking to be changed, that would be a different discussion. But I think most of the time that's not the case. Definitely not anymore.
It depends which community. That's the truth.
I'm talking about the individual, not the community.
No, it depends which community the individual comes from.
Oh, you're saying, well, that could just be shame of the reason why they want it changed.
It could be shame, and it could also be a deep desire to remain connected to the things that they love about that community. I worked with a man, and he was very clear that this is my experience, this is what I'm going through. He said, with tears in his eyes, but I love my community.
Yeah.
He goes, I want Sukkot, I want Pesach, I want those, and I want a family that I could sort of experience through those moments. They were meaningful to me.
Yeah, I know many people like this, by the way.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really, really do. But their position is never, I'm not sure what my identity is, what my sexual identity is. Their position is, I'm very clear. And
Not always.
I'm saying, no, the people that I knew. I'm not talking about, I'm sure there are other people. I'm saying there's a million cases, and no case is the same as the next.
Never.
I guess my point I'm just bringing out from the beginning is that in a scenario where it is clear, the person is not, it's like they come in very clear on where they are, and it seems everything points directly to that actually being the case. I find it interesting I find the perceived conflict between Torah and that more overblown than it actually should be from a hashkafic perspective, let's call it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's like a parent that thinks the best way is to hashkafically raise their kids is by controlling them to get the outcome that they see as a positive outcome for their child versus letting the child use his tchunos and understanding there's a faith component in this. That like, I will do my best, but I cannot control this outcome.
Right.
So here it's the same thing as like there. It's like, I will do my best, but my job here is not going to be to change this person. I will operate within the confines of what this person is presenting, and walk through that journey with that person, as opposed to like if the rub of the community is like sitting there pushing them, like you have to tell them it's like not okay. Let's just say theoretically, it's like, to me, that's anti-Torah. I don't see. Do you understand what I want to say?
Again, all these reactions are there.
Right.
Everyone has like a different take, and I think you're saying what I'm If I could put words in your mouth, like you're saying, the way I understand the Torah is it deeply values the human experience of an individual, and as a result, that's a part of your guide. But not everyone has that relationship and experience the same way. And the beauty of it is that we're all learning the same ideas, yet we're internalizing them differently. And I think that's a part of the struggle, is that everyone's going to see a different world, and they're going to respond to the world that they see and that they know.
All right, everybody, I want to take a quick second to give a big shout out to our sponsor for this episode, CubX. CubX is, as far as I'm concerned, the #1 IT provider for businesses, whether that be big or small, real estate, healthcare, finance, e-commerce, apparel. It does not matter. These guys have it on lock. I know this because I personally use them, and I've referred these guys to probably 10 different friends of mine who are all running both small or large businesses, and they've all come back to me and have given me rave reviews about these guys and thanked me profusely for sending them their way. So if you want to get ahead and focus on the things that make you money and not be busy for hours when a tech issue comes up, give these guys a call. They have changed the game, and most importantly, have changed the IT experience for those who use them. Their customer support is off the charts. I can personally attest to this. One ring, they pick up, and you're dealing with an experienced tech who knows what's up. Feel free to test it. If you're starting a new company or are unhappy with your current IT provider and are looking for the best product out there, take it from me. This is a no-brainer choice. Give these guys a call. You can reach them at 732-444-8771 and choose sales when following the prompts. Or you can reach out via email at hello@cubx.com. That's HELLO@CUBX.com. You can also check them out at cubx.com. That's CUBX.com. Now back to our episode. In a larger context, what do you think is the reason why, even across the board, like what did the last generation to you, let's just say, get wrong with, not get wrong, that's not the wrong word. I'm not here to like point fingers. It's not about that. why do you think therapy was not even it was not a thing, it was not in anyone's mind anywhere for sure within the Jewish world, but just in general, what changed now?
Well, I think it's more of a, if you had like a global phenomenon.
Yeah,
meaning
that's what I'm
when you think about most of our history, if you like to take a picture, like a snapshot of how did people live, again, obviously it wasn't always, but the majority of the time, people were like running. There's someone coming for them and they're running. Now, when you're in a state, Abraham Maslow talks about this. He talks about like the hierarchy of needs, where like lower basic needs, food, shelter, all the way to self-actualization. And his fundamental teaching was, you can't make your way to the next stage of development until you fully satisfy the lower stage. So if you look at it through that lens,
makes a lot of sense.
When society, when history was running and we're trying to survive, there's no real room to get to the question of, you know, how do I feel about myself? What are my emotions? And I think it's only after the Industrial Revolution, basically, where people had enough comfort in their lives that they could then say, okay, let me pay attention to my feelings. It's not like it's new. People always had feelings. They experienced love, they experienced hate, they experienced everything. But to do something about it is a real luxury. And I think we need to look at it that way. Like the current moment of time, the fact that we have therapy, the fact that we have people that we could process our emotions with is a real luxury. It's not just standard. It means we're safe enough to have dialogue about how do I feel. And most of our history, no one asked you how you felt.
Do you think there's any downsides to that?
Many downsides.
Could you share some with me?
I think that we get lost in that space. Freedom is a complicated thing. You know, on the one hand, that's what we're all striving for. On the other hand, the moment we achieve it, we're not quite sure what to do with it. You know, it's like everyone's looking to get to the place of, I want the financial freedom. Then speak to people who have that financial freedom, and it's not so simple. It's not so simple. What do I then do with that? Who am I? And what is my function and role in the world now that, okay, I have my comforts, I have all my needs potentially met from a financial perspective. We still need to grapple with our spirit. We need to grapple with like our purpose, our own uniqueness in the world. And money doesn't solve that problem. It doesn't resolve it in any way. So I think a lot of freedom on the one hand is a wonderful thing. But on the other hand, it introduces us to dialogue that is a little bit complicated and hard to make our way through. Like you would think today, through all our ancestors, if they were like they're sitting there one day in some hut, and if they imagine this world that we're living in today, that would be their utopia. They'd look at it and say, if only we lived at a time when there was abundance and people had food and people had shelter and they could talk about their feelings and they're picking their spouses. You know, these are all new ideas. They would have looked at that like that was amazing. Yet you look at our current time where we're in that experience and there's a lot of discomfort. There's a lot of misery that comes along with that. Trying to experience yourself when you don't quite know what that is not a simple thing. And sometimes it's easier for people to just do and not have to get to that place. And we introduce a lot of questions that we didn't have to ask before. So on the one hand, we could go deeper, and as a result of going deeper, we could live more wholesomely, we could live more alive. And so the upside is tremendous. But there's lots of people getting caught in a space of, I'm not sure what to do with this freedom.
What do you suggest there's a lot of people getting caught in that.
Yeah, there are.
And I would say that there's a lot of people getting caught in that because of the fact that other people are getting caught in that and bringing that out. So now that brings to light people thinking for themselves as well. Like, where do I land? Like, if no one ever asked the question of, like, keep it simple, of, like, am I happy? Or there's less people next to me that would be asking that same question. But now which, again, I still stand by the fact that I think having the ability to live your max happiness and max wholesomeness
is ideal.
That has to be as opposed to staying on the lower foundation, the lower hierarchy where you're just running, and therefore you don't have a chance to live. Yeah. I mean, I can't see.
I agree, but what it ends up creating is that when you have this ideal that we're kind of existing in, then there are plenty of people who haven't found that ideal, so they're grappling to discover it. And yeah, listen, I think that's.
So what do you suggest? I mean, obviously that's a general question, but what's a quick pointer for someone that finds themselves? You know, there's a lot of people find themselves in it. I guess for the person who's just starting to experience this, they're 18 years old. What would be your first just general point of action for that person?
I think for many people, especially if we weren't raised this way, like the idea that there is something unique about all of us. There is like and I think there's a spiritual quality to what I'm saying, and I exist in that world. I live in that space. I really believe, and there are other psychologists who agree with the same thing. When you go in the world of humanism and existentialism, they'll all say the same type of idea. They'll say that each of us are kind of born with there's a spiritual quality of we have a certain self, a way that we could actualize that self. But I think many people don't even know that that's a part of their journey. To introduce them to the idea that you're valuable, you have something unique about you, there is a state where you could exist in, where you're going to feel more wholesomely connected to yourself. I think just introducing people to that concept, especially when they're coming from a world where that's never really been introduced.
Yeah.
When the focus is about behavior, obedience, just walking the line and not necessarily deviating in any particular way. Someone raised in that world, they're going to have a hard time getting to a place of realizing that I also have my own journey to take. It's not just about the output. It's about like actualizing myself, and introducing people to that is a fundamental idea.
Yeah, I think the idea of just figuring out who you are, just on a very fundamental level, I think is something that's very often overlooked.
Yeah, and I think that's on some level, it's the greatest way we could honor what we've been given.
I think we're just so conditioned to walk a certain path that the question of what are my strengths and what is my purpose and what path does that lead me on is just never ever, till people a lot of times are older, it's never even, it could be 20 years into their life till they ever even think about it, and you're kind of lucky if you get it to that point.
You hear that? I hear that all the time from people, like I've lived my whole life, but I just woke up.
Yeah.
And you think about what that means. It means that there was their own personal consciousness was not activated.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And you just want to just love that person with everything you got. So I'm
they were like they were in a daze. They were just a zombie just walking.
Yeah. I was speaking to someone today
Yeah.
about that, and he was really describing a life where like an absentee mother completely, an abusive father. And he sort of described where we're trying to access like different emotions. Like how did you feel? And his response to that is, what are you talking about? What do you mean, how did I feel? He goes, I just did what I was supposed to do. I don't know how I felt. I don't even have memories. I can't recall how I felt. Wow. And that's the experience of someone who's in like this oriented state, and they haven't been introduced that way.
All right, everybody, want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Isak Clothing, quick wardrobe change, and I could never be happier. I started wearing their stuff recently. They are a business casual line offering style, comfort, and luxury. They have a fantastic selection of suits, blazers, and polos. Some of their signature products are Supima cotton shirts, which are super comfortable and offer a soft four-way stretch, breathable material, and offer amazing comfort. Pricing is affordable, ensuring you're not getting garbage, but also that you're not breaking the bank and you're getting great bang for your buck. Customer service, fantastic. That's the biggest thing for me. I use them. They're great. If you want to upgrade your clothing game, make sure to check these guys out. You can find them at isaknewyork.com. That's ISAKNY.com. I got you guys a great discount as well. Spend $100, get 20% off. You can enter a promo code upon checkout, Mislaibeled. That's Mislaibeled with an I, and you will be able to get that discount. So again, to check these guys out, go to isakny.com. That's ISAKNY.com. These guys are the new up-and-comers. Their stuff is fantastic. I've been wearing it lately. Super comfortable, affordable. You will not be disappointed. Now, back to our episode. Can we go back a little bit? Because I want to just figure out how you arrived to where you are now. So just on a very basic level, where did you grow up, and like how would you say your upbringing kind of contributed to this space?
My upbringing completely contributed to where I am. My mother, a blessed memory, she passed away a few months ago. Oh. And she was a therapist. But beyond that, she lived like an activist. There was like a demand in my home. It's not a coincidence. I'm one of 8. My brother Sonny.
Sonny's awesome.
Sonny's amazing.
Sonny's the legend.
I was chilling with him.
Sonny
today.
is not just
great.
on camera. I was telling Kiwi this beforehand.
Yeah,
He'll tell you.
He's a beautiful man.
All your siblings, by the way.
Thank God.
Then you have a sister also in Israel, right?
I have a sister in Israel.
Where does she live?
She lives in the Gush, in Neve Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because I asked her a long time ago if she would come on, But she wasn't around. I only do in person, so that's why.
She'll be in town shortly.
Okay,
Maybe we'll hook it up.
We'll have to make it happen.
3 Perlmans on your podcast is a big deal.
Well, but your whole family is.
Well, I'm one of 8, and 5 of us are therapists. The other and 2 of us that are therapists are married to therapists. My wife's a psychologist. My sister Sarah is married to a psychologist.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and the 3 siblings who aren't therapists are kind of therapists.
I'm going to do a research study on all the Perlman kids,
Yes,
the next generation. I want to see how all these therapists, because you guys are all awesome.
So
I'm willing to bet.
We're trying our best, but I assume we're trying not to mess up our kids, if to say it that way. And especially my kids, they got 2 therapists as parents. Like that, the stigma against them is pretty brutal. But they're amazing. I love them to death. And but my mother, like the focus of my home was never about anything but purpose and mission. Like that was the discussion. It wasn't, I think, on some subtle way, like if you were focused on money or success or achievements, like that was mocked. It was belittled. Like, oh, you don't understand what we're doing here, what the real value of humanity is. So there was, and it was complicated because on the one hand, it was like demanded of us that this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And then we needed to figure out for ourselves, like as adults, like, do I really want to do this? Or did I just do it because unconsciously I kind of needed to do that? And that was a tough question to ask myself. And I thank God going through that journey. One of my heroes, Bugenthal, James Bugenthal.
Okay.
He, wonderful therapist, an existential thinker. He spent a period of time in his career, like sort of like leaving. He had to ask himself the question of, do I really want this? Or was it like ingrained in me that I needed to be this?
Yeah.
And he did the most amazing thing. He actually left the profession at the peak of his career.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he just left. And he said, I got to figure out if this is something I want to do. And he returned. A little while later, he came back. I think it was like a year or so.
Wow. And
like the courage of that man, I remember reading that. I remember where I was. It was amazing. I was in New Jersey with my wife.
How did that speak to you specifically?
Because it related to me. Like I needed to, and I think all of my siblings, like needed to really ask ourselves seriously. Because when you're in any way encouraged to be something as a child, it's like you were talking about before. Like you either raise your children to be a reflection of you as a parent, or you raise your children with a deep awareness that like you have the honor of raising a child to become their own adult. And the posture of those 2 different approaches is profound. Raising a child where I need you to be a reflection of me. Bowlby talks about this, like the attachment guy. And he basically said there's like 2 different ways of looking at a child. You either look at a child and you see through their eyes into their spirit, into their soul. And you kind of ask yourself questions like, who is this kid? What are they going to be like? What are they going to teach me? And you get curious about that individual and you say, like, I know they came through me, but they're their own distinct entity. So you raise them always with them in mind. Who are they? Where are they best served? The decisions are ultimately coming from that place. And they internalize that. They know that they're looked at as, you are an individual and I expect you to become, I can't wait to see you as an adult and what you ultimately, how you manifest in this world. And Bowlby talks about the other way. You look at the child, and instead of seeing through their eyes, like their eyes serve as a mirror towards you. Yeah. So you look at them, but it's really a reflection of you.
That's more like the narcissistic component. I mean,
again, I wish I could deeply pathologize it, but I think we all do it as parents. Right. Like there's a reason why like the oldest children, even like the wisdom of the Torah, they get like a double portion.
Yeah.
Because we haven't worked through our own insecurities yet. So when we raise them, we're primarily focused on like how are they in relation to me, and that's a hard thing to work through.
I was going to say that so much of this really comes down to our own work on ourselves, because I mean this is ego 101, and pride. So like, and humility, I should add. Yeah. So if those character traits are in check, and you could separate to a degree your ego from yourself, and you could operate with humility, etc. Your ability to not develop that, not make that child an extension of yourself, but rather his own being, is obviously going to be significantly easier and more, doable.
Yeah. And I've certainly made my mistakes, and I'm sure I'll continue to in this area. The ego always shows up.
Yeah.
And even when you're working on it. But like you have those moments. And I've had like some beautiful moments where my children like taught me wonderful lessons about like, this is about you, it's not about us. And humbly you need to kind of receive that after you rage. After you go through whatever process you go through, you just need to find a way to receive it as best you can.
It's funny because you were saying before about how your mother, like that money and achievement was like secondary.
Completely.
So
not only that, it was belittled.
Right. So it reminds me of a quote. I pulled it up just because there's a very profound quote from John Lennon. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've probably seen this. The one that says, "When I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I want to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They wrote to me. They told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told them they didn't understand life." Like that's
beautiful. I never heard that before.
Yeah,
but I like
yeah.
It's a John Lennon line.
Well, yeah, it's very like everyone's chasing all these other things, chasing money and all the classics. It's like, what do I want to be doing? What's best for me?
Yeah.
And normally fulfilling mission and purpose is gonna and taking on responsibility. I mean, Peterson talks about this a lot. Like really taking on responsibility as a means for being able to actually be able to develop contentment. I mean, that's the separation between happiness, contentment, etc. But and I think
to me, it's a huge part of any meaningful journey you take is the responsibility piece. At the end of the day, whatever we've been through in our lives, and there's so many people that have suffered so deeply, but there's a certain point where we need to deal and work through that suffering, but also take some sense of responsibility for the way that we're living, the way that we're interacting with others. And I think that's a piece that often gets missed. Because to me, that's a very empowered space, responsibility. What could I do to make things better?
Not for what happened, you're saying, but for what I can control now and moving forward.
Correct. What happened to us, by and large, is what happened to us. We all have our story to tell. And I don't think anyone's immune. Everyone's going to be humbled at some point. I don't think anyone makes their way through this life unscathed.
Right.
We all have moments that bring us to a place of introspection. Sometimes it happens when we're 80 years old. I spoke to a guy today, I don't know, close to 80. And he's like facing a reckoning with himself. He's in that moment. And he was such a beautiful man. Just listening to him talk, he's so honest. He's like, I've lived a life where it was filled with suffering, profound suffering. And he goes, I became the guy. I just wanted to have a good time. I just wanted to survive that moment. And that was about it. It's like a deep insight into himself. But he's having that reckoning today. He said, there's been a lot of pain, but it finally hit that point where I can no longer move forward with the way I've been moving forward this whole time.
How do you tell people that forget about 80, let's look at 50 or 45?
It is an interesting question in general about therapy and age. But yeah.
No, but how do you what do you suggest for people? I mean, there are so many parents of ours, the generation, the last generation that could all use that reckoning. And, I think there are many that are scared to ever, face certain things head on, right? And they'd rather just stay out of it and, okay, their kids are doing whatever they're doing, but...
They grew up in a different world than we did.
Granted, but what would you suggest to the ones that are scared of actually taking that leap? They'll never admit it, but for the ones, if there are any watching or, maybe they'll watch us at some point, or even if they never will, what would you suggest to those people?
I think the step often that we need for anyone who's sort of stuck in their narrative and they're just, their heels are dug in, we need to sort of lean into imperfection a little bit. There needs to be an idea that they could just embrace and accept that I don't need to be perfect. I just need to try my best.
What about if accepting imperfection means that it's acknowledging very, very poor behavior?
Yeah, but think about what emerges from that. Meaning, if we're able to look at our bad behavior and we're able to, at times, apologize for what we've done. Like I was saying before, I've needed to apologize to my children for the moments where I was raising them for my own sake as opposed to raising them for what they needed. And those are things you simply need to acknowledge. But the depth that comes from that, the life source that comes from that, having that connection with your children, being able to have dialogue that's meaningful, is such a beautiful way to live. as opposed to sort of remaining in that scared space.
Yeah, there's no question that the beauty that comes from being able to do that is exponentially greater than and worthwhile than not doing it. But I'm sure there are people out there that having to face those demons and decisions. I think part of it is where did your family land up? You know, so like Baruch Hashem, if you have kids, okay, so they had a different. Apologizing means that you could have dialogue, but what's the downside? Like Baruch Hashem, they're good, everything's working out. For whoever it is. I'm not talking
They're
about
on
your
their
family.
journey. They're doing them.
As opposed to, I don't know, a family where one of the parents or both parents, the actions were so significant that the kids acknowledging and coming to face with the actions will be the explanation a lot of times for why exactly their kid is suffering greatly and has. And that's really where I find so many of these people dig their heels in. Because I mean, it's kind of one and the same. Like the person that digs their heels in, when they're 60 is the person that a lot of times was an animal when they were 30. And that's why they're digging their heels in at 60 because it's the same stubbornness and hard-hittingness that I will not. It's the same lack of being able to acknowledge imperfection at 60 that existed when they were 30. So it kind of just travels with age. Does that make any sense?
It does. But we have to always remember that they are, like today, someone raised, I don't know, millennial, someone born after 1980 or whatever, 81, 85. They were raised in a very psychologically conscious world. So to them, to be a good person, it means to be psychologically informed and capable and vulnerable and flexible and all those things. Most of our parents, their version of what it means to be a good person does not include that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a part of their education. It's almost like what we see now in America and across the world. Like we have some real dark periods in our history. We owned other human beings.
Yeah.
And we think like that's terrible. Yeah. We owned people. We bought them and we sold them to other people. But we have to kind of look back at that place and say they lived in a different world with a different set of values, a different understanding of things. And today, thankfully, as a result of progress, we're able to look at things a little bit differently. But they didn't see it that way. There were plenty of people who didn't like slavery at the time. But the universal consensus was, this is what you do. And it was across the world. That's what we did. And the beauty of our evolution, the beauty of our ability to grow and learn from our mistakes and try to better ourselves. I think it's a problem when we look at people who grew up in a whole different world and we hold them accountable to the same way that we grew up.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be a little bit more gentle with that.
It's funny, I was watching Joe Rogan a couple months ago and he was talking about Israel-Gaza war. And the conversation about the A-bomb came up, dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he was basically, for lack of better, he was shitting on the U.S., how bad we are that we did that. And it just struck me and so clearly how hindsight's 2020. It's very easy. I don't think what existed at that moment in time, it's very easy to look back 80 years and look from right now and be able to say, oh, we killed, 200,000 people.
We could have found another way to end the war.
Whatever, we're terrible people without taking into account the actual context of what was going on, the emotions and energy in the world at that time. And the fact that 1 million American soldiers would have been killed if we didn't do that, because we would have had to invade Japan. The estimate was 1 million people. So it's very easy to look back without any of the actual on-the-ground facts of what was happening at that moment. Yeah. Forget all the, competing, interests and everything happening in World War II. I mean, there's a lot going on, and just say, oh, we killed 200,000 people. We're bad. And we love to do that in this, in this world, we love to do that. We love to look back. I mean, it's part of the reparations idea of like, oh, we were always terrible. America's terrible, It's the same concept, I feel like. Talking about politics, actually, I was curious. What role do you think politics is playing right now in the mental health space?
Listen, having a president like Trump, it makes us all a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? It's a strange time. I don't know how much I could comment on politics, to be honest, in terms of how that's impacting us.
Okay,
I think I want to be able to talk about it in a meaningful way. And I'm not sure I could directly answer that question. I don't know if I have enough to say about the politics of our moment. The sadness, I think, and that I experience a great deal is like the profound divide amongst people. I also think it's a beautiful thing, because I think like you in an actualized state, you're going to think a certain way. You're going to feel most alive with a particular way of thinking. And everyone else is also the same way. So like to think about the design, that there are certain people in their actualized state fully believe in Trump is the right person. And other people in their actualized state think very differently. And that's why I think we'll never get to a place where there's like a universal consensus of this is correct and this is incorrect.
I'm not referring to that. I'm more specifically saying, like, in what way do you think mental health and the field in general was impacted positively or negatively by, let's say, far left policies, or just the impact in general that politics is having on the direction as a whole of the mental health world?
I think the mental health world kind of coexists alongside politics. It doesn't seem to me, I can't point to anything where I could say there's been a dramatic shift one way or the other. I could tell you this, when I was, as a professor, when Trump won the first time, the amount of emails I got from the university, which is a very liberal environment. This was, I was at LIU at the time, not Yeshiva University. Literally like letters with tears, like do not give assignments to the students. If they fail a test, just wipe it off. That part was a little bit like interesting. Like we kind of fed into the most fragile part of our reaction, which to me was interesting. But in terms of, I wish I had more to say.
You don't think there's a influence on research and on the mental health field as a whole from the liberal world that is, once in a large degree, putting together the DSM, et cetera, and really pushing the narrative?
But I don't think that changes. Meaning, I think the mental health profession is by and large a very liberal institution. Right. You have like pockets of groups of people that are influenced in other directions, but the profession of psychology, social work remains liberal, and they're not changing very much in that regard.
Yeah. What do you think about, how do we get better therapists? I always say in every single field, typically it works 10% are great, the next 20% are okay, and the rest suck. The problem is, in this particular field, the 70% who suck are dealing directly with people's biggest life issues. And unfortunately, I think there are definitely some who often probably make the issues worse, not better. And adding to that issue is that most of the time, the top 10% that are great are totally booked, and getting into them is
it's nearly impossible.
How do we get more qualified therapists who have the wisdom and intuition? I think that's the key point of how to deal with human beings. How do we get more of those people to the front?
They're always there. Meaning, there's always a portion of however many people you're teaching that meet that criteria. Like they're very intuitive, they're very heartfelt, they understand like human emotion, and then you give them all the education in the world. I think a lot of the programs are not necessarily like challenging people to enter into that space the way you're describing. They're giving over information.
Yeah.
They're teaching them theories and ideas, but they're not necessarily trying to nurture people. I always look at it when I'm teaching. I'm not giving over an idea. I'm having a conversation with people, and with the hopes that we'll be able to give over something that they could feel and then ultimately use later on. And I think psychology, just as an idea in and of itself, doesn't nurture that part of a person. But when it's taught in a way of I see you, and let's think about what you've been through in your life, and how that's impacted you, and then let's try to equate that to the people around you. Let's get a better sense of the human experience. I think that's just a better model of education. And I've taught in different programs, and I've seen like the trajectory of what that ultimately produces. There's always going to be good people, even in a bad program, that they're going to emerge on top. But when you have a program that is like it's not quality teaching, it's not really giving people what they need, I think it produces a real tough group of therapists.
I just think there's an aspect to it that it's very dangerous, because at the end of the day, all you need to do is pass a test, right? To become a PsyD, to
you need to write papers, and now you have.
Yeah, but that's like, and now you have carte blanche because you have
ChatGPT
or whatever. Yeah, but you have now you have you become a social worker. You're now dealing with people's most intimate issues, and if you're not good, which plenty are not, It could present a lot of issues. You're really playing with people's heartstrings effectively. What would you say? Because you often hear people, it's a sentiment I actually hear often, which is like, oh, I went to therapy and it's a waste of my time. Or all they do is sit there and listen to me, complain. They never ever give me any helpful advice or anything of that nature. What would you tell someone who's expressing that? Because there's a lot of people that would say that to you. I mean, I happen to have a different experience, but what would you say to
which is
others?
wonderful. That is different, but it is a sentiment. Meaning there are people that are going to go to therapy and have that experience. But I think even listening to what you're saying right now, if they were to hear this, that therapy is not like a universal thing. That once you get that degree, you're in the right place, you're in the right hands, and they're going to just take you to the promised land. You need to do your research in therapy. You need to kind of get a sense of what is it that I'm struggling with and what do I need and who ultimately could provide that for me.
Isn't the therapist the one who's supposed to figure that part out for the person? Because most of the time they're walking in there, they haven't even thought.
Yeah, but I think that the ones who ultimately end up doing better are the ones who are a little bit more informed, and sometimes it's the therapy process that informs them of what they actually need. Because not every therapist could do all types of work. Like I could be good at some things and bad at others, and that's the honest truth. I'm not a good therapist for everybody. I certainly have people that and I try now, and for as long as I can, to identify, it's not working. So let's move on to something else. Let's talk about the fact that it's not working.
You definitely, there are times someone, a friend will tell me or whatever, like they'll have just started, doing some personal work, and they'll be like, I can't stand that, he or she does this. I'm like, so why don't you just tell them? Like, well, I'm not comfortable.
People don't realize that that therapy is a place to tell people what you think, even your therapist. And if your therapist can't handle it, then that's a problem. Like a therapist should be able to handle. Like every time I walk into your office, I get anxious and nervous, and I walk out and I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Or I have a terrible reaction to you. You look at me in a way that I just don't like. Those are things we should be able to say to a therapist, but a lot of people don't know that that's what you're supposed to do.
All right, everybody, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Sunset Window Fashions, more commonly known as Daniel Dax, the owner of the company, who is fantastic. He does all kinds of window shades, whether that be drapes, zebra shades, Roman shades, silhouette, pirouette, you name it, any type of window shades. These are the guys to go to. As I always say, and it's the truth, I know this because I use them. Super, super nice guy. Amazing prices. I even priced it out with someone else. He came in far, far cheaper. Customer service, awesome. Just an awesome guy. I highly, highly recommend people reaching out to him. He's got the patience, picks up the phone. Just a nice guy with fantastic prices. You can't go wrong. And all the wealthy people are using him. He services mainly the New York area. Across the board, he will get back to you ASAP. The best number to reach him on is 917-440-0590. Again, that's 917-440-0590. Just ask for Daniel. You can let him know that you heard about him from the Mislaibeled podcast. Now back to our episode. What do you see as, a therapist's place specifically? A lot of people will be like, I'm asking for advice. The therapist is not giving me advice. I want advice. And there's a common component to therapists will say is, I will not tell you what to do. I will, so where's the... What's the role? How should the healing process be implemented? Should advice be given?
Again, first of all, just know that I know very few therapists who don't give advice.
Okay.
At its core. We tell ourselves we don't give advice, but the way you ask a question often is giving advice. The way you phrase it lets the person know how you actually think and what you believe they should do. So even though we're trained, don't give advice. And I think there's a reason for it. When you think about, if I were to tell you what to do in your life, like to me, I would experience that as I'm dishonoring you. Like I'm dishonoring by sort of telling you this is the way that you should choose, this is the course you should take in your life. The greatest honor you could give a person is give them the space that they could be themselves and they could figure out which next step they should take.
So having the power to be able to make the decision on their own.
Correct.
But there's a place for advice also where you can ask 100%. For advice. So
I first of all, I think therapy is a tool for a problem. I don't think therapy is a universal thing. There are some people who use therapy as like a luxury. I want a place to process my life. But usually people go to therapy because there's a problem. They're struggling with something, anxiety, depression, trauma, and they have something that they need to face. And I think it's important that we therapists understand that role, because there are many therapists who want to take on the role of mashgiach, they want to take on the role of something else. And our primary job is to help people with the problem that they're bringing in from an emotional perspective and help them with that, to journey forth with that. And how we help people with that is going to be different. We could go through all the different theories of what help is and how to frame it. Well, first of all, there are theories like the cognitive and behavioral theories. They're filled with advice giving, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, meaning you go there and you say, like, I'm depressed and I'm sleeping in my bed. I haven't done anything meaningful. I have no more enjoyment. In cognitive behavioral therapy, they're going to give you suggestions. They're going to say, let's get out of bed. Let's try to find some friends that we're communicating with. Let's find things that you could do that are ultimately enjoyable. There's a real direction, real guidance. And then the other end of the perspective, like in the more psychoanalytic world, is it's just about creating that space for a person to figure out why they're depressed, to get to the essence of it, with a deep belief that the depression is not just a behavioral problem, but a symptom of something else, something that's not being tended to.
Which one, I mean, this is obviously a common question. Which one are you?
I'm much more drawn to the, humanistic, existential, psychoanalytic world. Like those are the things that have influenced me. But I think every therapist needs to figure out what's influenced them. And the moment you define yourself, you're also limiting yourself as a therapist. If you say, okay, this is who I am, this is what I'm good at, you're also precluding a whole group of people that don't meet that criteria. But it's a deeply...
So how do you view that, given that you're more drawn to...
Yeah, that...
Does that mean you're precluding yourself from all other avenues?
At times, sure.
Got it.
Sure, there are certain issues that, like, I'll get a call and I'll basically say, like, I don't think I'm the right person to help you based on what you're describing. But I know some good people. I have some good friends. And let me get you in that direction. Knowing your place, knowing what you could do, what you can't do. At. Yeah, I'm not very good at the behavioral stuff. I could do it. I know it. I teach it, but it's hard for me to implement it because it's not aligned with how I think, how I live, how I feel. It's just not there.
I feel like it ignores the soul a little bit, the spiritual side.
Completely.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Fuck that.
You're like, done. Let's cancel it.
I just went from 0 to 100 on you. Like, whoa.
That was awesome.
Not that you're not surprised.
No, but you have a conclusion,
No, I'm joking. But no, I'm with you, though. Like, the spiritual, I go back and forth so often. There are times I'm a huge Jewish music guy. It's random as hell.
Yeah?
Huge.
What do you like?
Level.
What's your music
I'm an
choice?
MBD person to the death.
No way.
Yeah.
MBD.
Everything, but I'm saying you asked me what I like. I
love it.
That's
old school.
I am old school OG Jewish music. Always. You can ask anyone who spends time with me.
Miami Boys Choir?
I mean, I don't like Miami Boys. I know Miami Boys, like compared to Yeshiva Boys Choir, they're a million times better. But that's not the point.
I'm just wondering the era.
No, I'm Avram Fried. I'm Mordechai Ben David. I like Shreki. I can dig Shreki a little bit.
Right. Real, like, classic mainstream
currently,
music.
First of all, currently, the Hasidic world has taken over Jewish music as far as quality is concerned.
Yeah.
I'm talking about these Steinmetz. I'm saying these are Yaeli Weiss. These guys are putting out music that is talk about spiritual. I would even argue there's an aspect of the music that's coming out right now, Barry Weber. This stuff is more spiritual than the MBD Avram Fried era. And now we've kind of just became, I think the Litvish world has just become a bunch of Taylor Swifts at this point, just like putting out crap, just, I don't know, sounds good for a camp, to put on when the parents are coming into camp, be blasted in the loudspeakers. It's like the Revach of our generation, but it was fun. Like Revach had a place in that time because you had Shreki and you had everything else happening.
And we needed some Revach.
Now everything's Revach, bro. Like just take that out. Like just stop. So the Hasidic world's taking that over, but I'm a part of the reason why I'm such a Jewish music junkie is because first of all, music taps into my soul like it's crazy, But half the time, I'm not joking. Sometimes I drive, I'm listening, I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this podcast? Let me just shut this damn thing down. Let me just go back and learn. Like there are sometimes like I literally think
you sort of go, you visit that place
frequently, not just randomly.
Well,
like
it's a part of you.
I
It's a real part of
frequently
you.
like struggle back and forth. Like maybe I should just hang this stuff up, give myself time. But the problem is then you have regret. Then you're worried. Well, you don't necessarily have it, but then you're worried that will I regret stopping what I'm doing, like let's just say theoretically, if I stop the podcast, right? Like I put so much energy, so much effort, like I built something.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you like what this means to you, this whole journey.
That's a heavy one.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, I can answer that question actually. For me, it's a learning journey. It's a testing journey. What I mean by that is that I'm testing certain theories. I'm 2 years into this now. And I'm testing certain theories and beliefs that I have on life, honestly, and how life works.
Like this is your playground. It's your way to experiment with like, let me see what this is like.
I have certain hypotheses and theories of how success happens, the lack of its straight line, how resilience is necessary within success, just how success is honestly further away than you always think it is. That's the truth, you know?
Well, I think it's always evolving. So, you know, when
No, but I'm saying whatever it is that you're trying to reach, just always.
Yeah.
It's always on, it is always further than away than you think it will be. And that's why I think most people walk away just with regards to whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, often, not always, but people stop things right before they're about to actually succeed. And if they gave themselves an extra year, they would have been successful. And you see that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you see the
people
people that
push
have,
a little
you've seen
forward.
the people who have, you know, climbed that mountain, pushed that through that obstacle, and then a year later have that.
Do you think that successful people, they have no choice but to do what they're doing, so to speak? I remember hearing, I think it was Ringo Starr, you know, the drummer for the Beatles. And someone asked him, like, you know, how did you become so good at this? He said, I became good at it because I had nothing else I could do. He like lived with a sense of, this is the only thing I could do. This is me. I know this is me. I think I feel like that a little bit as a therapist. I'm sure there are other things I could do, but I feel like this is a manifestation of me,
Of your soul.
of my
who
my
you are,
being,
your
in my
spiritual
soul.
essence.
100%.
Yeah.
In the experience, it's spiritually gratifying.
Yeah, but that's one of the things I was telling someone about the power of like every human is just the underlying idea that there will never be another Akiva Perlman and there will never be another Laibel Wiener. And that is your contribution to the world. Like it does not make a difference if someone else has what you perceive as your quality or
That's
not your
it.
quality. What you have the ability to invent is singular.
Yeah.
There will never be another one of that.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's extremely,
I
extremely
love that
powerful.
thought. Yeah.
That's why, like, yeah, that's why to me there's just a strong passion. Like for me, I think the most difficult thing is balancing all the different components. Like that's really the truth. I think balance. I mean, it's very cliche, but balance is the most key word. I mean, I think if you're talking about the concept of like calling the Musser concept of shleimus or completeness, right? Completing the spiritual essence of ourselves, it would be to be able to hold all the great character traits in balance at once, right?
Yeah.
So the healthy level of each one of these things to coexist at the same time.
I've struggled with balance. It's interesting because I think
Me too, by the
you're
way,
a
in case you didn't
passionate guy. You're a passionate guy. You care about what you do, and I find that passionate people have a very hard time turning off their passion. Like they're driven by something, like a need to express something, to impact something.
Yeah.
And you can't turn that off. It's not a balanced idea. Passion is something that is just full. And I used to try to pursue balance. And Sani was the one. We had a long conversation once. We're sitting in a hot tub, I think. You know,
Sounds about right.
Every once in a while, we'll go away a little bit and we'll just chill and we'll talk for just hours. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
And he phrased it differently because I was talking about the pursuit of balance, and he said, "What about the idea of like working really hard and then giving yourself a treat?" He said, "What about view it in terms of treats? Like I had last week, I kind of needed to do this. I love snowboarding. I love nature. I love just sort of being out in open spaces." And like challenging myself to go a little bit harder than I did before. It like makes me feel alive.
Alive, yeah.
And like to me, I needed to go because I don't like the term burning out, but I was having a hard time being present with the work that I was doing. And it's a disservice to the people that I'm sitting with. So I needed to take that time. But to me, I looked at it as I worked really hard, and now I have a little treat. And I'm going to get right back to it because I really want to work hard. Because I believe in these things. You know, that's what passion is. And I'm trying to figure out you can't say how do you balance passion with balance. Right. But how do you integrate passion with the concept of balance?
Yes, I mean, I was more, right. So I'm more referring to the balance of character traits, if you will, versus like the pursuits that make you feel alive, which are more, those pursuits to me are more, not materialistic, it's the wrong word. They're more like specific things. Like, let's say, I'm passionate about the podcast, doing real estate, and obviously making impact. But what I was talking about, the balance is like being able to, that I'm referring to is, like one of the things I want to talk about as an example is like, where's the place of where empathy is needed versus the place of, no, we're being oversensitive and exposing our fragility to people, right? Like nowadays we're in this space where everyone, we have a world which is so empathetic that we let terrorists into our country because what are they going to do if they're not able to get in? They're going to be outside, and right. That's one side of it. I don't know if you saw. I had Dr. Godsod on, so like this is a very big. He has a book that's coming out called Suicidal Empathy. Right, as it sounds. Right.
Well, I think empathy without responsibility is a very dangerous form.
Yeah, no, of course. But my point is just the ability about making the right. There's no decision that is ever correct for every situation. Right. So that would be the idea. Oh, he's so empathetic. That's beautiful. But is he not empathetic when he's not supposed to be empathetic? The 1 out of every 25 times. Does he have the ability to hold space and be present and the wisdom to know when that moment is? Right. That's the sign of greatness to me. Not
they could hold all at the same time.
Correct.
They're all available.
They know when, right? And that's the person you want to go to ask advice from in a tough situation, because they're able to keep everything almost in front of them at the same time, knowing your history, knowing what's, with life experience, and they've worked on themselves to the point that they've developed such a, deep intuition and understanding of the world and the universe, that to me is what their balance I refer to when I say like a great person. Like those are the people I call, when I'm trying to like figure out what I should do in a situation.
Right, because you know that they really could look at all the options, and what you're going to get is a thought-out response.
Yeah, and they're going to catch me where I miss something.
Yeah. I think this plays out in therapy a lot. A lot of bad behavior comes from a lot of pain, almost always.
Of course.
Addiction, for example, is not the problem. The suffering is the problem, and it manifests in addiction as a solution to that particular problem. So I think we need to have a lot of empathy for what brought a person to that behavior. But then we need to have a lot of responsibility, like for to let the person know that, yes, I understand where it comes from, and that's the empathy. But at the very same time, you're living in a way that you're hurting yourself. You're hurting the people around you.
Yeah.
So you need empathy for the journey, but then the responsibility for the action.
Yeah.
And without that, in therapy, when it's just about the empathy and it's just about the understanding, we could stay in that victimized mentality for years.
That's
and we're seeing a lot of that today.
Yeah, that's what has to. That always drove me mad. Like, I know a lot of people could use a dose of that. Like, the therapist holding them accountable at a certain point.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what someone else should do, but I've seen enough cases that in my perspective, I mean, listen, I've been doing this 12, 13, more, 15 years now. So I told people, I'm like, with all due respect, you might be a social worker or a PhD and been doing this for 4 years in school. I've been in therapy 15 years, dude. I've spent more money.
I got a PhD. I have my own
PhD. Okay? Like, dude, trust me, I've told enough cases at this point, not even myself, that
That's
awesome. So there's a certain point where I just get a feeling of like, okay, fine. This person's been doing this.
Dr. Laibel.
Dr. Laibel.
Let's do it, baby.
Yeah. I was going to say before, you were saying Akiva Perlman. Laibel Wiener is, it's definitely, I questioned whether or not I should keep with that. I'm happy I did.
Yeah.
While I'm doing this. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Were there thoughts of like, maybe let's go with another name?
So when I was 17, I was insecure about it in the work world. So I went with the name J-A-Y. It was random. I walked in like, what's your name? I'm like, all vulnerable and insecure. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm just going to pick a name because I didn't like my Hebrew name. Surprise, surprise. When From family goes and gives English names to their kids, it always is a disaster. That's what I find. It's like, somewhat. It's like Keith, like it's not my name, but they'll give like just a horrific name. Like, why can't you just call him Michael? Like simple. Like we could throw out like a plethora of good names. They never choose any of those. Like
It's true.
you could just Jeff. I mean, I
Make
could
it simple.
keep it simple, stupid. Sam, whatever it is. Eric, this, that. Samuel Eric Warren, shout out. My buddy. It's a good name. So I landed up with Judah, which by the way, now I don't like it, but it's not horrific. Fine, it's biblical. I don't love it. But back then, I didn't like it. So I went with Jay, which is still, I don't think it's a bad decision, but it more came from a place also of insecurity. Now, when I was starting this, I was like, nah, I'm going with the label.
That's it.
Like, that's who I am.
Wow, it's like I'm gonna show up as myself.
So you were asking me about this podcast. So I think the teacher of it is also is the courage component. It was starting this. I think every single stage has had its level and need of significant courage. And I have had to remind myself at times that courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's
in the presence of fear.
It's in the presence of fear.
Yeah.
I remind myself that when it happens, especially in the beginning. I mean, now obviously it's easier, but there's still scenarios that come up, obviously require courage. Like I just started this pod on my own, right? Meaning I have no co-host now. I'm doing this one-on-one, which is significantly more difficult. So it was it was the next step of like the first time I ever put out a podcast, it was, let's just say, first time of courage. Then I, had a big guest on, my first big guest, the next level of courage, right? So you keep on building on this mountain of courage, let's call it, to the point where now it's like, okay, the final steps, let's just say most recently, was just doing this on my own, which I'm looking at this as an awesome challenge. Like I'm enjoying thoroughly. This takes so much nuance and detail. Like that's the truth. It does. I'm not here to complain. Like I love this. I'm just saying that part of this that keeps me going is that I'm enjoying thoroughly this challenge, and especially getting good at something that I'm not naturally good at. Like I told someone, I'm like, I'm the person who's supposed to be interviewed, not the person. Like a good interviewer shuts up and listens to his guest. I don't know if I've done a good job here with that.
You've done a great job.
But I'm not good at shutting up. So by definition, I'm not the person who's supposed to be interviewing, right? So that's the idea. So for me, what drives me, especially at this time, where we are right now, is just mastering this art. Like in this moment, I think I'm like 6 pods into doing this.
Wow.
It's not even of course you want your followers, you want your listens and everything, but I think that comes with time. But I think it's mastering it. That's just like,
right. It's almost like it's you against yourself.
You know what it's like? It's like changing a bad midah. It's changing a bad character. It's like, can I get really good at something that I innately suck at? Can you imagine me? Can I get good at listening? I can't listen, right? All I can do is talk. If I can get good at that, I'm joking. I'm being a little No,
I got you.
That's the work. That's exactly my point. You're saying, since you're listening, so then I'm doing a good job. I'm happy to hear that. But I'm just saying, as a general, Jordan Peterson started his own podcast. Whatever, not the, but he became famous off giving his lectures. Yeah. And people listening to him. They want to hear him talk. And one of the big things now that people don't like, they love him so much, they don't want to hear him asking questions. They want people asking him questions. So he started his podcast where he's the interviewer. And he's speaking to all these other people. And people are like,
we're not interested.
You're in the wrong place.
On the other
side. He's still doing okay. I think he's still probably averaging 3 million views a podcast. He's not suffering too much, but just an interesting.
Yeah. There's nothing like we create like these mountains for ourselves, and then we slowly just start chipping away. That whole journey, every step of that journey feels deeply gratifying. Even the moments where we feel like we're not doing well, because we've identified, okay, I need to do something a little bit different. Yeah. And that whole experience, that's like the actualizing journey.
I think the hardest part with this, in regards to anything else that I've done, is the vulnerability of it because of the publicity. Like this is a type of thing where every single thing is in the open. Your success is in the open. Your failures are in the open.
Wow.
Like everything. Do you have a good guest this week? Do you not have a good guest this week? Did he sound like a moron? Did he sound good? Every single, how many viewers you have, every single facet of this is, as opposed to if, I don't know, let's just say you're, crapping your pants in real estate. No one knows. It's not available to the public for anyone to know if you had a good year.
This is you're placing yourself in the public sphere and seeing what it's like.
Sometimes I'll tell people who work for me, I'm like, I'm particular because I'm putting my brand is being put out into the world, meaning put out an authentic reflection of me. If this is not an actual authentic reflection, forget about whether or not it looks good or bad. I don't want that going out because that's not actually,
Is there something you're looking to achieve through this experience, aside from your own sort of conquering yourself and evolving into a place? Like, is there a message you're trying to share? Or is it the message is the journey itself?
I don't think the message is the journey, no. I think the best answer to this, I'm just thinking about the best way to answer this properly. I think the message that's most important to me, I mean, I have long-term goals for this. Like long. I'm not talking, this is not a 1-year play, a 2-year play, a 3-year play, or even a 5-year play for me. This is a very long play. I'm not looking for anything. I'm losing money. This is not a making money endeavor. This is an expensive hobby. It costs a lot of money. It's a much longer term play for me. With that said, I think for me what's important and has always been interesting, and if there's one message that I think is intricate, is that we all have some sort of belief that if person is A, therefore they is A in one area, that therefore they have to be B in another area, And if that person is B, then they're C. And it's just okay, so if Laibel is very, very aggressive, then that means that he has to be, a dick. Which, again, is fine.
And he doesn't like MBD.
People, or whatever it is. And people always love that. And that's fine. And people always be like that. And that's fine. That's not an issue. But for me, I try to just put out there and have this podcast just be honestly a reflection of myself. So just my views. No, I will be pro-Trump, let's just call it. And at the very, very same time, have a deep, intense conversation with a top therapist, which is something Donald Trump would never, ever do or wouldn't even know what you're talking about, right? He'd be like, what planet are you on? Because I believe both things could coexist at the exact same time.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's the idea of being able to hold all the beautiful things the universe has given us at the same time. So what would commonly be looked as aggression being bad, sorry, I say I disagree with that. There are times where aggression is very much needed. Yeah. Maybe not physical, but something you have to know how to put your foot down. You have to know when there's a time and place for that for sure. And then there's a time and place to very much not put your foot down and to let things slide. Yeah. So it's all these, we want to make things binary at the end of the day.
We're safe when the world is binary because then we know what to do.
Yeah.
But I think we're all better off entering in, learning to tolerate the unknown as opposed to trying to create a world that we understand.
100%.
Because that allows us, and I think that's what you're describing doing. I want to introduce people to nuanced complexity and let's hold it all at the same time.
Yes.
And if we could hold all that at the same time, it means that we're elevating ourselves.
That's very, very well said. I just think there's a lack of intention in the world of thinking, of analysis. That to me is something, and with all that comes, spirituality plays into all that. Deeply into all that, So for me, it's, I'm not into just, operating without thinking. I hate that. Yeah. I think there's so much of that. And that to a lot of people, the problem is, and like you said, there's so much pain that comes with thinking. Until you get to the other side of that, it could be a long, arduous process. Let me freaking tell you. Okay. Yeah. Let me tell you. Yeah. So I think that a lot of people don't want to think.
Jung said a beautiful line. Jung was
Carl,
contemporary of Freud.
Yeah.
And he said, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. He uses this term shadow a lot, but that's kind of what you're talking about. That when you expand in any direction, then bear in mind that it's expanding in all directions.
Yeah.
So the greater ability that we have to visit places that are challenging for us to visit, on the other side, it equals a greater ability to experience joy, to experience peace and comfort. And the more we limit it, then we simply limit our capacity to experience this world. I just feel like Hashem gave us this amazing world to live in. Let's just live in it. Let's enjoy it. What a journey.
Someone said this recently. Who was it? I'm trying to remember. Now you have it on my mind. Said something very, very similar. It wasn't Tyson. Tyson's an odd figure.
Tyson, by the way, is such a deep guy.
I know,
you do not expect it from.
But can you explain it to me? I think weed. By the way, I think he'd be the exact same.
Is that your theory? Weed made him more complex, you think?
No, I think listen, let's be very, very clear.
Okay.
In the 1990s, I don't think we would ever call that guy deep.
But what if we didn't know that he was deep? What if he was like that all along and we just saw him as a boxer beating people up?
No, because he wasn't just a boxer. There was his innate. I'm saying he was an animalistic person at the end of the day. Like he was not in control, let's call it, at all of any human faculties that were bestowed upon him. I mean, that would be the differences between man, right? So I loved watching him. Don't get me wrong. I think he's, as far as a fighter and a competitor, oh my gosh. But when it came to everything else, I think we could just. But now I'm listening to this guy. I'm like, I am so confused. This guy's saying like, did you ever see the interview he gave that little girl like a month ago?
Oh my gosh,
that was hilarious. But it was hilarious at the same time because she was like this 9-year-old girl just like asking a stupid question. So what do you take? He came in there and gave her this like she's like, okay.
He wrote a philosophy book.
Yeah, like literally
as an answer.
But that was such a. What do you make of that?
I think I don't know. I imagine life taught him something. Maybe it was the highs and the lows, but something prompted a journey. He clearly took a journey.
Yeah.
I saw I don't know, I think it was like a play that he did. And I saw a recording of it. He had like a play on Broadway for a while. It was like a one-man show, and he kind of spoke about life. And I saw it once on video. I was just sitting there like my jaw dropped.
It's fascinating.
I'm like, holy cow, Mike Tyson has so many beautiful things to say.
It's the craziest thing. It almost doesn't seem like the same person. It's
I love it. I love it.
This guy that owned tigers. Like, he's so, it's wild. The whole thing is insane.
Yeah.
He bit off someone's ear, dude.
Yeah.
Like, he was convicted of rape. We're talking like, and now this guy right now is like, I'm listening to him and I'm like, this guy's saying good stuff. I can't.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting.
Can I ask you an interesting question?
Please.
Because it's always on my mind. Mm-hmm. I wonder what your thoughts are on it. Do you think very successful people, because very often very successful people, they'll share their ideology later on and they'll talk about it. It's like a succinct way of thinking. But do you think people thought about that before, or they've only arrived at that as a result of the success that they were in, and the success brought about that ideology? It's something I think about.
Depends what you mean by ideology. When it comes to like how to become successful, like steps to success, or you're talking about ideology like political ideology and like what works in the world?
Life ideology. Like they figured out the right way to live, and that's what they're talking about. They're sharing it with other people who have made it in whichever industry.
I think most successful people all have rather somewhat common ideologies as far as life overall. And you might say, like, what am I talking about? I'm just saying as far as, let's say, family values. And like, I'm trying to understand. If you're talking about success values, it's a little bit different. Like, what makes someone successful is a different question than just like, what's their ideology and like best way of living life. I find, I'd be shocked to find many very successful people that would argue with the basic tenets of,
right, like fundamental living.
Yeah, like you want a 2-person household, they would all say yes. Do you want, your kids to be going to good schools? Yes. Is education important? Yes. Is religion important? Most of them would probably say yes, some form of it is important. I think most people, even the ones that are not religious, would say that, for example. And I think, so then it comes down to the intricacies of like capitalism versus, the specifics. That's already a little bit different. I think, believe it or not, people who become billionaires lose actually a level of, trust when it comes to like, all of a sudden they become big liberals. I think part of that is because they almost forgot about what it was like to ever be poor. So it's just like, let's split everyone's money up, because to them it's not an issue. Like, what's the big deal? I'm worth $1 bajillion.
Why not?
Nothing changes if I go give away $1 billion and tell everyone else to also. And I'd love to see a study of people that are worth, let's just call it between 10 million and 100, what they're like, where they stand as far as like politically. And people that are, or even 10 to 500 and then 500 plus. I'm willing to bet that the 10 to 500 million will all be like conservative, straightforward. And once you start going up past 500, you'll see a lot of, these weird people. It's like, what? Like, why are you like imposing 50% taxes on everyone and like voting for Newsom? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, what is happening? Oh, your house burnt down? Oh, so you flew on your private jet to the next 12 houses that you have on the Caribbean islands? Like, that's why you're going to vote for him again next election? Like, it just doesn't compute, That's why, and this always struck me as a very interesting thing. Like, why is Mark Cuban voting for Kamala Harris? Like, and selling her like she's Gandhi. And it's like, stop lying to me. Like, you don't actually believe this. Like,
Right.
that was what my mind, it just didn't make any sense. And there was very few people.
Trump is a very divisive character.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about? What is your...
I struggle with a leader who I don't respect as a person. From what I know, that's it. I appreciate his ideas, his policies, and what's important to him. A lot of those things are important to me as well, especially his relationship with Israel and Jewish people in general. I appreciate those things. But it's just hard for me to like look up to a person. Like when he first came around, I quite honestly did not vote for him.
Right.
And I just couldn't.
Right.
You know, I did recently because
Too much of a lack of kindness and immaturity in your like.
Right, like
chaos.
I want my leaders the same way like the people who guide us to be stand up, you know, upstanding citizens, kind people, introspective people. Yeah, but I also
the famous back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, so then you have Joe Biden. I mean, he'll give you that, but you're going to be getting a whole lot of policy that you don't care for.
I live in an idealistic world that maybe it's possible to have both at the same time.
Oh, I would agree. First of all, J.D. Vance is that guy, if you ask me. You know?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I don't know enough about him to like comment fully, but I enjoy hearing him speak, that's for sure.
He's so... I feel like you would love him. You got, like... He should be your guy.
He's my dude?
I think so.
All right.
I mean,
I'll check him out.
He is so well-spoken.
Yeah.
Did you watch his debate? You have to watch his debate.
I watched the debate. I thought it was fabulous.
So how are you not an instant fan of that?
No, I liked it. I liked what we saw. I did.
You don't get the Trump, downside of just...
Yeah, but there's a quality in that world of like this like absolute knowingness. There's so much ego involved. I just have a natural aversion to that way of being.
I think every single person in that world is that way. That's the truth.
That's unfortunate.
Every single one. Yeah. I think Trump is actually the only one that's just dead honest.
I prefer to live in a gentler world. That's it. Well, I just prefer to live in a gentler world.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
That's it.
I definitely can understand that. I see both sides, but at the end of the day, I'm a very results-oriented guy. Like that, I'm an outcome and results guy to the death. Like to me, ultimately, that's what matters. So yeah, of course, I'd rather the perfect candidate. Honestly, a J.D. Vance, and that's why people wanted DeSantis, because again, it gave you the Trump policy without the Trump rhetoric. So and that was the natural preference. But like when it comes down to it, okay, who's going to fight these people? And take it right to them. There's a reason why he won, Yeah. They created him, honestly. That's the truth. They created him. I sat with Laura Trump and I said, I don't think your father-in-law ever would have won unless Barack Obama became president. He would have no shot in 2008. She's like, no, I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah, I also agree, 100%. Yeah.
None of this happened. Obama was the problem.
Yeah.
Look what happened. There's a clear divide. Not that the minute he walked in, bro, everything race critical, every single thing became about race. That's my,
Yeah, but there was a part of it that really touched my heart. The fact that we got to a place, knowing the history of our country, the fact that we got to a place that we were able to like vote in a black president, I think was a wonderful thing for all of us.
Absolutely.
Whether or not he's the guy who did did the job well enough, that's a different story.
I mean, I just think he squandered a fantastic opportunity. Like, trust me, put Clarence Thomas in as the president. I'm in business. I'll vote for him right now.
Good. Yeah.
Who cares about the skin color? It's not important. But yes, the fact that we finally got past that hurdle as people
was
a beautiful
moment.
thing.
Yeah, I shed a tear. That's for sure.
I didn't go that far, Akiva.
I did. I remember the night when he won. I was sitting in my bed and I was crying.
Really?
I really was.
Wow.
I really was. There was something about it. I felt like, look at us. Look at us. Look at us as a people.
I take it you didn't cry when Trump won.
I didn't. There was relief. There was relief the second time around.
There
was relief
because
why?
So why
because
not
of the current state that we're in, and the massive divide, and the extent by which. And again, I consider myself a liberal. Let's say, as a thinker, as a liver, as a person, not like a liberal in terms of their ideologies that they hold, but the extent by which that community has gone, and sort of forced certain ideologies upon people. I think it just wasn't sustainable. And it needed some element of correction, and that's where we are. We're always correcting. When you think about us as people, we're sort of like going. Every generation is responding to the generation before it.
Yeah, that is a beautiful aspect, actually, of democracy, is that it allows for that ebb and flow between those two things. But I do fear that, the problem is when you keep on going, the self-correction keeps on being less and less to the center. So effectively now, what we call the self-correction is, Trump, this Republican Party is not a traditional conservative, party.
No.
Right? It's center, if anything. And that's at best.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's centered with an extreme personality running it. But the ideas are centered.
But that's my point. But they're not even conservative. So now we've relabeled the word conservative and liberal, and we've just moved it over the timeline. More to the left. That's all that's happened. So, like, when's the point? Does that end? Now I'm only, right, I'm 30, but I do remember when it was far more to the right side of the timeline, or at least somewhat in the middle of the scale. And it was like, now we're leaning left, even with where we are.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
That's just an interesting.
Well, that's the human spirit. It's always striving for more and deeper and actualizing. And I think once you're on that path, it brings you, at times, when it's a little bit misled, it'll bring you to some pretty strange places, extreme places.
Today, by the way, just to speak to that, like 204 Democrats voted in favor. And this is like where I lose my mind, by the way. This is where I'm a no tolerance policy guy. Like, there's certain things.
Let's get it done.
No, but I'm being serious. There's certain points, foot down. Yeah. 204 Democrats voted for banning life-saving care for failed abortions. I mean, they're born alive. 204 Democrats voted, do not save the baby who is alive. Let the baby die. This baby's breathing in this world. Here, there's a baby. Let it die.
Because it's not well?
No, because the woman wanted an abortion. And the abortion was a failed abortion. So they don't want...
Wow.
I'm not... This is...
Yeah, I hear you.
What do you mean? That guy who was Kamala's running mate, Tim Walz, whatever. There were cases in his, he signed the bill, same thing, in his state. There were babies, like 6 or 7 babies who this happened to, right? They tried doing an abortion, late-term abortion, didn't work. Mm-hmm. They killed the baby afterwards. I mean, it's like, or let the baby die or whatever. I mean, it's...
You're a passionate spirit, brother.
I don't know, civilization, man. It just, I don't know. I'm more of a conservative. I've always been a more last generation type of guy. And like, I don't know why we have to do away with everything. Why can't we keep the good and get rid of the bad? What the hell?
I agree.
You know, so what's the Will Durant line? A nation is born stoic and dies Epicurean. It's so much truth. That's literally our generation. The last generation was stoic. We built incredible things. We went to the moon. We did wild things. This generation's Epicurean, right? And we're seeing the result of that. Yeah. Right? Where now we don't even have to go into all the examples. And it's just like, no, why can't we just keep the good things? We'll just add in like the emotional awareness and mental health stuff, and we'll be in a great space. Like
we're gonna do okay.
We'll have the work ethic, we'll have the family values, we'll have all those things, and then we'll pull in the pieces.
At the end of the day, I'm not quite sure we know what to do with our freedom. I think because it's new, I'm not sure we know really what to do with it.
It's like making a lot of money. In a way,
that's something.
People who make money. This is one of the big issues with people that make a lot of money. Is that specifically in the beginning, they don't know what to do with their money. So most people never envision, they never think, what am I going to do when that first $5 million hits the bank account, especially if it's a windfall. So like, or $2 million or whatever, right? What am I going to do, right? Especially someone who doesn't have money yet. All of a sudden, $2 million, maybe they can envision it there, right? So they've been fantasizing about that / manifesting it, but they've never thought what they're going to do with it. So it rolls into their account, and then they blow it. It's kind of like the lottery, you know what I'm saying? Most of them are poor. Because they don't know what to do with the money. They've never actually...
Yeah, what do I do with this freedom?
Yeah, it's like... Yeah. So what's the answer?
The answer? Engage it as best as we possibly can. Figure out what it means to you. Slow down a little bit. Focus on why was it important for you to be successful in the first place. What is it about the money in the first place, or is it about the acknowledgement, the achievement, the pushing oneself to a new space? And I think if we could gain some insight into why we do what we do, then when it actually happens, we just have greater access to that moment. We're more flexible in that space. It's very often how many people are deeply, deeply driven, but are not necessarily aware as to why and what they're kind of attempting to fix in that experience itself.
You know, I still think about this all the time. I mean, I've been thinking about it for 10 freaking years. I still don't have an answer. That's the truth. I really don't. I know multiple.
As to your drive?
Yeah.
Where
I
it
have
comes
multiple.
from?
Well, I think there's no question an actual inherent ambition that I just possess. I possessed it as a kid. But there's also no question there's various other components that drive me.
But you don't imagine the flip side of that possibly, again, I
Please.
no analysis.
You could give me analysis.
No, but I'm not looking for that. But because I find that's disrespectful. I'm asking a question. You don't analyze people unless they invite you into that space, and I don't belong there.
I like that. That's a good.
But it's
not.
not.
I don't care, but there's a lot of people who don't like it. So what you're saying?
Yeah, no,
so
you simply turn it off. You know, if you have something. But don't you think like the development of a profound need is coming from some type of reaction of some element of deficiency related to that experience? Don't you think that, let's say, the drive for success is coming from potentially a part of us that doesn't necessarily feel that way, that needs to prove it to ourselves?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So that we know. We know what it's about.
But you could do that in so many different areas.
Yeah.
But so why this area? And is the feeling, you know, am I trying to prove other people wrong? Am I trying to prove myself right? Like, is there an aspect of this that there's a belief of the destiny involved in it? Like, there's so many. I mean, I don't think it could just be summed up to one
No, I don't
option.
think we're summing it up. But I'm saying, like, if let's say you know that, then you approach it a little bit differently. If you don't know it, it's just about the prize at the end of the goal. Like, that's it. I just need to achieve a certain thing. I'm not aware of what it's about. If you know what it's about, it opens up some room for maybe I could get that in other ways. Maybe I understand that even if I arrive at that goal, it's not going to nurture that void that exists inside of me. There's room to maneuver that.
But it's very difficult. Right. No, I'm with you, but it's tough to figure out, first of all, how much of the drive is coming from the insecurity and the deficiency, thereby leading to there still being a void, even if you were to accomplish what you want. Versus, hey, by the way, there's a real ambition in myself that has always been very, very driven. So maybe I will feel accomplished as I could continue to do these goals. And I do feel accomplished a lot of times. But then the bar obviously always jumps to the next rung, right? But that doesn't mean at the same time, even if the bar moves, that I don't get satisfaction.
I think there are plenty of things that emerge from complicated spaces, but they have a beautiful manifestation in the world. Like, it comes from a wounded place.
Yeah.
You know, I think my desire even to get a doctorate or to teach, like, it wasn't necessarily coming from a belief that I could do it. It was coming from a belief that I couldn't do it and wanting to do something about that so I could feel a little bit better without realizing that once I got there, like, it didn't actually accomplish what I wanted it to.
So
now,
what would you have told yourself before you started? Now, not to do it?
No, I wouldn't tell myself not to do it.
Okay, so what would you have said?
Maybe do it a little bit differently.
How so?
Do it with like an awareness of this is not just about the achievement, the destination, but it's about the journey a little bit.
By the way, that's sort of what I'm with you 1,000,000% on that. I've been thinking a lot about that. That's partially why I'm saying, like, for me right now, what's important to me is the challenge, because that's the journey within.
Yeah.
I'm not as focused on, of course, like I said, of course I want the listeners, you want the watchers, and there's going to be a point where I feel like I have mastered this and I'm ready for that, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, you just want more. I mean, for good or for bad, that's just the way life works. But for sure, like, there's this journey that you're asking me all the way circling back of, like, I don't know, man. It's good to challenge yourself, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, it's the greatest.
It's good to, like, just build the muscle of not giving a flying shit what anyone thinks. And the more you just, except for people that are close to you, I think that to me is the line for me. Like, that's where I draw it. I mean, you could disagree. I welcome the argument.
I'm not going to disagree. I'm saying that I think there are other ways of looking at it. I care deeply about what people think, but I also feel at times I'm in a position where I feel responsible to exist in a certain way in order so I could do, the role that I'm in. Even like with the way I dress, let's say. I work in Williamsburg now, and it's with a certain community. I don't want to I don't want to be in an environment where I'm not honoring the role
No,
that
I don't
I
mean
have.
that. Of course, you have to be respectful.
Yeah.
I'm not talking. I'm just talking about, let's say, sharing your opinions and people having, criticism, etc.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that, right? The deep, like the vulnerability that it takes to put yourself out there and open yourself up to all of that. I personally, that's a skill that is extremely important to me, to like not give a damn. Like it just does not matter.
Yeah.
To me, the lesson always is like, if the people you're close with, for me, that's my indicator. Like everyone can have their own indicator, like, but for me, my indicator of like, when I start listening is like, if I'm close with the person, they know me and they have a difference of opinion with me on something I'm doing. I don't know. To me, all this podcast is I'm enjoying it thoroughly. That's really what it comes down to. Regardless to people complaining about this issue or that issue. And again, there's right now, for example, at the end of the day with this story, right, there's a bevy of people who are uber upset about one reason or another, by the way. If it wasn't a North Woodmere story, it's a different opinion that they don't like. If it's not, and it's just learning to just be okay, like, and move on. And I think that's, most people are afraid of that.
Yeah, it's
That's all.
yeah, I hear it.
Again, to each their own. To a lot of people, it's fine if they're afraid of it, and that works with their strong points. So it depends, I think, what your strong points are. At least to me, like what sort of you probably have to work on. Would you say that's accurate?
I think we all have different things, and yeah, it could be for some people. This is their essence, and they need to encounter it. They need to work on it. This is what they know themselves to be.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're trying to give like a voice to the voiceless at times, like to introduce people to concepts and ideas so they could tolerate it and be with it and still be okay with themselves in hearing something that might be a little bit different than what they typically know.
I think that there are a lot of people that are emerged out of, this generation that are in a similar space to a large degree. And I again, I didn't start to connect with them. I just started because I just felt there was a lack of authenticity surrounding it. Like just, there was no regular conversation going on, just an honest conversation happening on a podcast in digital media form. It just didn't exist. So
Right, like to a specific ideas and specific population.
yeah, it's just, I don't know. To me, a firm podcast should, to a large degree, represent the exact same conversations that are largely happening at a typical kiddush or in shul on the average week. I don't see why it should be radically different than that. So at least this version of what's happening in shul, which happens plentiful, I wasn't seeing done anywhere. So to me, it was just, why not do this? That's all.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, actually on the topic of failure. I feel like you could, and self-doubt, right? It could be crushing, right? Especially failure, like people double down, triple down, does not work out, and thereby induces all sorts of self-doubt. What would you say is, what's some advice you would give to someone who just is in a cycle of self-doubt and just stuck in that?
Like caught in the cycle of I just can't, like they've tried enough things that they believe to be coming from them, and those things didn't succeed. Again, I always go back
When
to
you say those words coming from them and those things didn't succeed.
No, meaning I think there's a big difference between someone just trying a bunch of different things to see if they could find success, but there's no like emotional investment in that experience. So when I say it's like coming from them, meaning they really believe this is representative of me, I'm putting it out there, and that fails, I think that's a lot more crushing than someone who's just trying different things and different experiences.
Yeah, you're saying one is the self-actualization of like you're putting out into the world yourself.
Yeah, I think that if the goal is the only thing that we're striving for, is getting to a place of like that destination of I am whatever we envision ourselves to be, or I need to have X amount of money, or I need to have X amount of fame, or I need to have X amount of that, then we're largely setting ourselves up for some element of failure. Because the intention is not so much about what is the journey that I could take. How could I express myself? How could I find a way to be comfortably in my own skin? and also find a way for that to exist and find success with it. And I think that failure, I remember getting a call from someone who he was very successful then, and he's much more successful today, where he had said to me, he said, I can't tell you why yet, but I just lost the best $1 million of my life. That was his understanding of the moment. And I think that was all he had at the moment. Like he lost everything. But his relationship to that whole experience was, I know this is going to teach me something. So that's a person who's on a journey with, I'm trying to get somewhere, and I'm also trying to learn along the way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure myself out along the way. And I think when it's just about the destination, it's just about, okay, I need to acquire this because that resembles my success, that resembles, my arrival. Those people, they're very tight. They can't really tolerate a sense of failure. Failure, which successful person or any person do you know who didn't have to endure some element of failure to get to that place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But tell me if this is correct about what you're saying, is that when it's just about the destination, then really your self-worth is hinging solely on that outcome.
Completely.
But okay, fine. So let's just say, there's definitely people that all they do care about is the outcome, but they're relentless, let's just say, I'm trying to put my thoughts into words specifically here. There's an element for sure where people do need some level of
striving for something.
Well, for sure they need the striving for, because you need hope, you need motivation, and those components. But for the person that's not being successful, every human being needs a certain level of success, right? Ultimately, to feel worthy, you can't be a total failure and never ever reach an objective.
Right, but we need to define that very differently for everybody.
Okay.
Like what if you were to give me your version of what success is? I imagine it's going to look very different than mine.
Right.
So each person in their own space needs to find some success for them, and I agree with you. We need to find success. We can't just. I always dislike this pop psychology idea that I want to just feel good doing nothing.
Right.
I just want to be good. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, the way that you're going to feel good is by bringing yourself into the world and doing something that's representative of you, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And it's going to come in many, many different forms. So we do need to find success, but within what's important to us and what we're capable of.
Would you define that at the end of the day is a spiritual thing? It's it's the self-actualization and using
I
that self-actualization
view it through the lens of a very spiritual lens.
You do?
I really look at the idea. Again, aside from being raised with this, I struggled with it for many years, but I think I was able to internalize it more a little bit later. But we always grow with this idea that we're born with a tafkid. We're born with a purpose. And that means that our spirit is brought into this world. Our soul is here to accomplish something, to do something. Meaning we were given certain capabilities to actualize in the world. And to me, I think it's like a spiritual journey getting to that place. Because the only way that could exist is like your soul has a unique purpose.
I'm with you. I so get what you're saying, and that's why really each person's success is different, because
completely.
Yeah, because the spiritual aspects of ourselves are also different.
Yeah, I think the problem is that when we're pursuing some other person's life, because we've created an ideal of, and I think that's where a lot of the failure exists. If you're really looking at it as how am I going to actualize myself, a failure is a teaching moment. It's not a moment of sheer devastation. It's like, okay, that is something that wasn't aligned with me or wasn't supposed to be at this particular time, or I need to approach it a little bit differently. But the moment you make an objective outside of yourself, it's just about reaching a particular destination because some other dude reached that place and they look really good, you've already failed. In that moment, you've already failed.
Where do you feel that goal setting is important? I presume.
Well, I think, again, if I were to ask you, where do you want to get to? I hope that you set goals to get there.
Right.
But that's indicative of you and your story and what you want to be. So goals come along with this process. I have lots of goals. And some of them I hope I can meet. Some of them I'm pretty certain I won't. But it's...
Right, but it doesn't hinge on that. That's really the key.
It doesn't hinge on that.
Yeah.
It's not...
And your happiness and how happy, your fluctuation in joy is not going to be as extreme.
It's going to be directly related to how aligned my life is or another person's life is with, that spiritual journey of finding themselves. I think that is where happiness lies. the moments where I feel most content, which is hard to get to. I don't live in that space all the time. I'm a man with a great deal of turmoil. So I'm always seeking some type of peace and some type of contentment. But where it comes from ultimately is when I feel that the way I'm living is aligned with what I believe I should be living.
Highly connected.
That when the more aligned they are, and we have the ideal
so much
self
sense.
and the current self, and the closer they are to one another. The problem is that when those...
Let's say you don't know. Let's say you think you have multiple. Like, I think that's me. I feel like I honestly think
You got a
there's,
lot to accomplish. You
I
have a
don't
holy
know.
soul.
No, but I'm being serious. I don't know. Like, there's only so much time in the world. It's only in a day, and almost so much time.
No, but could I ask, what are the moments where you feel honestly like most aligned with what you are and how you're actually living your life? In what space, in what environment, in what interaction?
It wouldn't be in the working field.
Okay.
It wouldn't be anything to do with real estate or the podcast. Like, that's not where it would be.
Where would it be? I'm not talking about joy. I'm talking about alignment. I'm talking about where...
From, like, the root soul.
Yeah.
Can't believe we're doing this on a podcast. Oh, my God. It's a tough one. Honestly, probably learning, as shocking as that sounds, but I'd have to do a host of but I'd have to do a host of work first of all to accept that.
Wild idea.
But
it's amazing that's where you went. It's really
because from a spiritual sense, that I think is the only thing that would truly connect me at a very...
But does that mean that you've experienced that in your learning? Like you've had moments while you were learning, engaged in it, where it felt like I've arrived with myself? This is.
I think there's a depth there that taps into the spiritual component, of the human that is very, very... It doesn't have to necessarily be just learning, let's just say, Gemara, for example.
Right.
Like it's... Learning Torah, to me, is a much more all-encompassing thing than just necessarily breaking down, like, I don't know, Tosfos or something. Like, that's the essence of life, hence the spirituality, right? It's that...
Do you have particular, like, Sfarim?
No, I'm not a big learner. I'm just saying, like, conceptually in my mind, if there was a place that would go to make you feel most connected and content, it would be that. Not necessarily this. But at the same time, I feel like, and this is what I was saying before, that if let's just say I were to go and do that, maybe I would regret, not having ambition. Like, it's confusing. There's just a lot there.
Yeah.
Because there's ambition. You want to be successful. You want to actualize certain things, certain strengths. I don't know. There's all those things. But like, would I be shocked? I don't know if in 10 years I just said, fuck this. I don't know. And just went into my thing. No, honestly not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be, but I think I would always, I don't know. I think I would always, there's a voice that I have that I wouldn't let go ever. That's the truth. Maybe that's the best way to say it. I don't think I would ever.
Compels you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I have a voice for a reason. I've never said that on there, but yeah, I don't, like, I believe that. So, and honestly, I don't even use it as much as I should. I'm busy most of the day. I haven't even been on, so, I got rid of all my apps already, like 2-3 weeks ago, huh? Yeah, I deleted all my apps. They have a code on them. I can't even use them. So I'm not even on, like, I'm not really active anymore on a day-to-day.
In terms of, like, expressing that voice.
Yeah. I mean, I could be, the people that are in the media space are day and night. I mean, they're recording. They're putting out so much content. I do this once a week, and then maybe I'll shoot out a couple of tweets nowadays, but barely. Like, I'm not screaming from the rooftops. Trust me, if I start, it becomes messy. It becomes people hear it.
You should know that for me, like, moments like this are very wholesome.
Why is that?
Because it's just an honest dialogue with another person about life and the journey that we're on. And those moments, they just feel so alive, so wholesome. And I just appreciate it.
That's why I was very excited for this, actually, because I know how you enjoy these type of conversations.
I enjoy honesty. I enjoy realness. I enjoy conflict and challenge. And because it brings us to a place of a deeper understanding of what we're doing.
I'm with you. I really, really am. Who has been, like, the most instrumental to you in this journey as far as, like, being a clinician? Like, been the most inspirational?
I think it exists on many planes. I mean, I have like my teachers in the realm of psychology that like have really given me a language that I appreciate. You know, like there's the same idea. Like, and when I teach theory, let's say to graduate students, there are different ways of doing it. There's one like you're teaching, this is the best theory. This is most correct. It's evidence-based. It's been proven to be correct. And then let's teach it so you could become that. And to me, I have a different way of looking at it. To me, we all have a theory. It already exists. Our life has informed that theory.
It goes back to, I mean, not sorry to interrupt, it goes back to the spiritual.
100%. In a spiritual way, there's a belief system that we operate with. That when you wake up in the morning, when I wake up in the morning, we look at the world. I assure you that we see them differently from one another. But you do it your way, I do it my way. And the goal of, I think, becoming a good therapist is aligning yourself with that spiritual quality of what's already been given to you. And once you're succinct in that place, so I remember like just the journey of becoming a therapist and reading all the different literature that was out there and finding, it was very similar to Svarm, to be honest.
Interesting.
Like just journeying with learning and trying to explore, where do I gain my inspiration from? And I don't know which books or Svarm or ideas give you that inspiration, but I found it in the Hasidic world. I found it in other types of literature, and philosophy. But when it comes to like psychology, like when I found like certain teachers like James Bugenthal and Rollo May and Irving Yalom, these were people that like the moment I opened their books, I'm like, I understand this. I may not have had language to express it.
We're talking to each other.
Yeah, like, hey brother, like when you wake up in the morning, you're kind of like seeing things in a similar way. I went to therapy for a period of time with Yalom. And we discussed that. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience for me. He's like one of my heroes in the field of therapy. And I spent some time working with him. And that experience was wonderful because it was so aligned, and I was able to ask him questions and explore things like that. But I think I have other people that not just like the therapists that have shaped the way I think, but there are other people in my life that have shaped the way I think. You know, my mother was a huge influence on, you know, the passion of trying to be helpful in the world. I come from a very just broad and open family that's just simply unafraid of ideas and thoughts and exploration. Each and every one in their own way has been like a profound influence on my life. And I have, you know, my Rebbe and other Rebbeim that like that are there with me on the journey, you know, and I see them as people who are sort of holding me in that space. And I talk to them when I get a little bit lost.
What would you say is the most like powerful lesson that you've taken away? For you, if there's a fundamental lesson throughout this whole thing.
That we should probably, as often as we possibly can, choose to love ourselves, others, embrace. At the end of the day, I think when you listen to a lot of suffering, and what a dear honor it's been that I've been like had the opportunity to meet people that have struggled so dearly. You hear enough of that, you kind of like realize we're all in that experience together. And we're all in that experience together. The best we could probably do is, instead of disagreeing and fighting and saying, oh, I'm here and you're here, just to embrace and love ourselves in that journey itself. I think that's, if anything, it's expanded my heart so much more. Like I just have more room for myself, for people. And it all came through a lens of suffering. It didn't come through a lens of like positivity. It was like noticing that this is quite universal. Like the best of people that I've ever met. And I've sat with some great, great people that have made such a profound influence on the world. And I had chances like to listen to their own unique stories. And most of us, we look at those people and say like, no way, they figured it out. They're living in a different kind of realm. But the truth is we're all in this kind of unknown experience together. And instead of disagreeing and struggling with one another, I try my best, and I think it's a wonderful idea to just lean into as much love as we possibly can.
It's like tapping into the human experience versus tapping into being right or wrong.
Yeah, I don't live in a very defined, finite world of black and whites. Yeah. I largely exist in the unknown and the gray. I just prefer it there. I have a very hard time with people who have definitive opinions. This is right, this is wrong, this is it. I'm like, says who?
You're talking to the wrong person.
Okay, I'm glad you have opinions. That's good.
What I take away from what you're saying I love your attention to, like, really to the human experience, like that specific. Like, you really revolve, like, for the underlying foundation that I'm hearing really over the course of the conversation is really in whatever it is you're doing is figuring out the spiritual component and the human side of yourself and aligning whatever you're doing with that, so you're living your truest self and your most self
To a
actual.
very large degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could be, if you're a therapist, go in line with that. If you're
Vivaldi.
whatever you're doing, just stay within that. It makes so much sense. It's like basically you're living yourself, so it's the most natural, the most pure, and the most unadulterated. Let's call
Well, I
it.
think it's the greatest way to honor what we've been given. Like, you were given certain talents that people around you weren't given. And you're honoring yourself and where you came from by actualizing those things. What a gift. Really, what a gift.
I have one last question, because it's getting late over here. What would you say is the biggest misconception about therapy right now?
I've been struggling a lot because every era has its own kind of focus on what therapy is. You go back 15 years, it was all about behavioral therapy and DBT, and it was evidence-based. That was the dialogue that we existed in, that we lived in. And today we're saturated, and for good reason, in a trauma narrative, in a trauma world. And I've struggled a great deal with the promise at times that people offer that, like, go on this journey and it's all gonna be good. And like you're gonna wake up one day and you're gonna feel amazing and wonderful. And I think that happens for a lot of people. We wake up many days feeling wonderful. But the promise that at times it offers of, like, the relief of struggle, the relief of what it means to be in the human experience, like we're talking about, which is inherently filled with conflict because we're trying to figure it out all the time. So I've had a really, really hard time, because to me, therapy is a tool that helps us learn to tolerate challenge as opposed to resolve challenge. And I think when we go in the direction of, okay, we're going to resolve struggle, we're going to fix it, and we're going to get to a place where we're no longer a part of every other human experience that we're in, it's something I just struggle with very deeply. And I feel like we're giving a message to very vulnerable people that are suffering deeply. And we're giving them, we're dangling this little, like, carrot in front of them, basically saying, like, there's a promise, do this and you're going to get it.
Are you referring to the ayahuasca crowd?
It's not only ayahuasca, because that's a part of it. Ayahuasca offers, like, a promise, but even other classic treatment modalities of like suggesting, I'm going to relieve you of something, it's going to be gone. And I think that's a promise that it hurts people in the long run, because you have all these people that are getting a little bit better at a time, but they're like, how come I'm not relieved of myself?
Who's the people promising? Is that the overall industry that's doing that? Or
I think in this particular moment, we have lots of those promises. We have that promise from the psychedelic world, which again, I think has profound value for the right person, the right place, right time. And all these things are helpful. They really help us. They work. They make us better. The problem is, like, it's being packaged as like a sheer resolution of the human experience. And I don't.
What do you see as the direct downside?
The downside is we're now living in a time where so many people are pursuing, like, the absolute freedom from any type of struggle. And I think that when you give over that as a goal to people, you ultimately hurt them. And I think instead we should be saying, yes, life has been hard. And I assume life will continue to be hard. But let's find a way to develop resources so we could handle it a little bit better. We could tolerate the ambiguity. We could tolerate the unknown. I just think it's a much more balanced, healthy message. And it's causing a lot of chaos specifically with the people that are suffering the most. And I feel like that's something we all need to answer for.
Yeah, because once you don't have realistic expectations, the letdown is so much greater.
But that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. There's like a desperate attempt at this moment to, like, completely relieve ourselves of ourselves to some degree.
In what forms do you see this, though, specifically? Is it with the psychedelic movement? Like, I know
Again, it's the
who's giving this message over? I'll be honest, I'm not, like, tapped into the field like you are, so I'm curious. I haven't heard it. I haven't gotten that feeling of energy and that wave.
Right. No, but like you said, you're looking for the people that are going to have a much more balanced perspective. Like the people, most of the like you said, the top 10%, they don't have that language. It almost comes like from an insecurity. Like I'm going to completely fix the situation.
I mean, the problem is, yeah.
You know, but it's certainly coming from the psychedelic world. It's certainly coming from, again, these are all valuable things. I don't want to speak poorly about them because they're really helping people a great deal. But one of the messages that come, it was a new idea that was simply introduced like 15 years ago in the trauma world. Like, we're going to fix this. We're going to resolve this.
You're going to be perfect after this is done.
You're going to wake up and feel wonderful. And anything I've learned is that every single day we're going to have to find a way to face life, even in times where it's really challenging, and find a way to show up in that space as well. So let's develop resources. Let's develop an ability to tolerate the experience that we're in, as opposed to going in the other direction of free me, just free me. And and on a daily basis, I'm speaking to people who are in like that desperate chase. And it's all you want to do is embrace them and say, I hear you.
For the people that are new to therapy, right? Because, I mean, those are the people that I truthfully want to help the most and that know the least about this. What are some ways they could evaluate whether or not the therapist they're with is a good fit or not a good fit?
I think many clients don't realize that they should really pay attention to how they feel in the relationship itself.
Okay, so explain that.
They don't, meaning what if you're going to therapy and every single week you're feeling just beat up and you're feeling disempowered and you feel like smaller and smaller. So many people go with the perspective of the therapist knows. So this is what I'm supposed to go through. But we're supposed to really pay attention to our experience. And if it's not feeling right, it's not feeling hopeful, it's not feeling humane, like you're being respected as the person you are in the struggle you're in.
Define respected.
That your voices and concerns are really being heard and they're not just being pushed away and diminished in that particular moment. There are plenty of therapists who will take on a very strong, assertive role. I'm going to fix you and follow my lead, and then we're going to get you to that promised land. And I think the inner experience of clients are listening to themselves, and often you hear about this later. Because when you're in it, you feel like, well, okay, there's the promise, so I'm going to go along with it. And all I need to do is follow suit, and things are going to get better. But when they really ask themselves, like, how am I feeling on a weekly basis? Like, they're really struggling. And I think many clients don't know that they should really pay attention. Like at the clinic, we have a particular intake process where they're meeting with some of the top therapists. It's not, you're never meeting with a new therapist. We want to evaluate and assess, like, what really are the needs here? And there's something that we say after every intake, that pay attention to how you feel. Like if it doesn't feel comfortable, it doesn't feel hopeful, it doesn't feel like this is a place where you could be you, let us know. We'll begin to make a change. Now, of course, therapy is hard, but it should also feel safe.
Don't some people, in order to feel hopeful, want someone who's going to be a little bit, not necessarily over-promising and under-delivering, but someone that's going to be more of a, listen, I'll give you more direction than just, like your style is obviously very much listening, human experience, let me hear you, fine.
Yeah, but I want you to know I have a clear destination, in theory, in my mind, with every client that I work with.
No, I'm sure. But as far as, let's just say, at the end of the day, let's say someone's not feeling hopeful. Right. First of all, they obviously have to give it a certain amount of time, right? I think we could just agree to that off the bat. Sure. But let's just say someone's 3 months in and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, why I'm doing this, and not feeling hopeful. Do you think that's problematic?
I think it's more than just not hopeful. It's I don't really feel honored. I don't really feel listened to in a way that the way I'm saying it is being received, in the way I'm trying to communicate it. I'm being cut off a little bit. I'm being corrected a great deal. I think those are feelings that many clients don't know they should actually listen to them. And I think it's really important that therapy at its core, 2 people sitting in a room having a conversation, that's at its core.
What's that mechanism meant to do?
That mechanism, at many levels. Number one, there's the journey that you take, but I think even the shared space. If let's say a person, most problems that we struggle with have an interpersonal element to it. They have to do with relationships. And I think that for many people, to discover that they could have a meaningful relationship with their therapist. And then say, like, they realize, like, oh, I could do this. They could begin to apply that elsewhere.
Yeah.
The goal of therapy is not that the therapy becomes the center. It's that the other parts of life become the center. But sometimes you need to go through that experience to realize I'm capable of it, and I can. And therefore, I'm willing to try.
Yeah, that's very fast. That's profound. I appreciate that. I want to say thank you very, very much.
It's
That's
a
why
real honor to be
I
here
could sit
with
for
you.
another 3 hours.
Me too.
But there's other people that have to go. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on, really. Any plugs for anything? Book, podcast, this, that.
It's an honor to be here.
Just,
We're living, we're journeying.
Another awesome Perlman.
No, it's
You
all
guys
right.
are
We're trying,
all
man.
rock stars. I'm not kidding. Your mom did a good job, that's for sure.
Thank God.
So yeah, thank you, Kiwi, again. I really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week with another awesome pod. Peace and love.